energy sources. Without objection, it will be entered. We will now recognize Representative Boebert for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for joining us today. I appreciate you coming out here. In Colorado, we are and have been facing historic drought and wildfire crises. And instead of allowing us to solve these issues through developing critical water storage, the water supply projects, or actively managing our forests, which is something I'm very passionate about, especially in Colorado, where we have just so much national forest lands. Democrats want to blame climate change, and they delay these critical projects indefinitely. The current permitting process under NEPA is unworkable, and I'm proud to support Chairman Westerman's much-needed reforms to this very broken process. It's something that I've encountered struggles and difficulties with on a regular basis throughout Western Colorado and the Western United States even. Mr. Pugh, you mentioned that current NEPA regulations trigger litigation that burdens smaller rural communities, many of which I represent in Colorado. And meanwhile, we have larger, more resourced communities that may be able to afford sufficient legal representation. So could you just expand upon how frivolous these frivolous lawsuits can slow down, add costs, or even block important water and infrastructure projects?
Certainly. As I stated before, as soon as you add NEPA into the process, you're looking at least a 25% gain on how much your project is going to cost. A lot of our rural and smaller communities simply don't have the resources to be able to fund that additional 25% on top of their projects. And in most cases, they do not have the expertise on staff, so we wind up immediately having to go outside and hire outside help.
Yes, and so some seemingly simple projects may even be intimidating for small tribal and rural communities that are concerned about going through NEPA to even begin that process. And with this, when you state the federal funds that are introduced and at least the 25% increase that you just mentioned in a project budget, would you just expand a little bit more on how that does impact those rural communities, our tribes, and just smaller areas?
Again, the additional 25% just right off the top, adding to the cost. And also for us, whenever we would go into the NEPA process, our contracts with our outside consulting engineers and environmental people were open-ended because we could not adequately describe how long the project was going to take, nor could we adequately describe the entire scope of services that would be required.
Yes, and we've experienced this in Colorado with Wolf Creek Reservoir up north in the Northwest. It was about a decade just going through that NEPA process before it was ever, permitting was ever approved. We have funding to begin that, but there's still more processes that need to take place in that. So I don't even think $5 million is a drop in the bucket, but at least we're making progress. So to eliminate some of those burdensome regulations and the frivolous lawsuits, I think would be extremely beneficial. Now, Mr. Jakins, you stated that the current NEPA landscape of years-long unconstrained reviews followed by extended litigation makes it difficult for your co-ops to conduct the necessary basic maintenance and vegetation management operations in a timely fashion. Would you agree that the current regulatory framework increases the risk of adverse events like wildfires?
Yes, I would.
Yes, yeah. Well, in Colorado, we're coming off some of the worst wildfires seasons in history, and it certainly doesn't seem to help that it takes the Forest Service an average of 3.6 years to begin mechanical treatment and nearly 5 years to begin the prescribed burn under NEPA. And just my last final question here in my last few seconds. Ms. Reams, the Biden's regime CEQ's Phase 2 regulations add burdens to an already overburdened NEPA process. Can you expand briefly, while my time's expiring, upon what reforms CEQ should implement to better align with the law and the congressional intent?
Well, the intent also was, it was supposed to be simplifying, then we had a 430-page document to simplify. So I think one of the pieces that's important on this document, this piece is that it does not reduce community engagement. It continues community engagement, which we all agree we need. So I think there's just some mischaracterization about what this does, would be my quickest answer.
Yes, I think only Congress and bureaucrats could simplify in 435 pages. Thank you all so much for your time, and I apologize for going over. I yield back.
Thank you very much. Before we go on to our last speaker, I do want to enter into the record this chart here. This is the federal approval process. And I just want